Hello and a very good morning. Welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. I'm Frank Pereira. All eyes will be on the Finance Minister Arun Jaitley today as he gets set to present his first full-fledged budget. Of course, that's likely to happen in a few hours from now, and the entire nation is waiting with bated breath, right from the common man to the industries and corporates and everyone else, to see what their share and what it is that they will get out of this budget. We here at Rajya Sabha Television will keep bringing you minute by minute updates as far as the budget is concerned, and we'll have elite panels of guests as well right here in our studios to try and decipher the budget and lead up to the budget as well to get you all the latest. But for now, let's begin with the latest headlines. All set for Finance Minister Arun Jaitley's first full-fledged budget today. Growth and fiscal consolidation expected to be his key focus. Ahead of the budget, economic survey emphasizes on scope for big bang reforms, forecasts a growth rate of over 8% for the next financial year. Jaitley's resolve to cut down fiscal deficit to 4.1% this year will be tested today. Steep fall in crude oil prices likely to offer some relief for the finance minister. And all eyes on Jaitley's roadmap to implement the goods and services tax regime. Finance Minister expected to tweak tax rates to implement GST from next year. Well, the union budget will be presented today, and it will be keenly watched across the country. From expectations of tax breaks for the common man to measures for bringing down inflation, all eyes will be on Finance Minister Arun Jaitley. Let's take a look at what the expectations really are.
Finance Minister Arun Jaitley has often said that he is not in favour of burdening the salaried and middle class with more taxes. Saturday's budget will be looked upon with a lot of hope of tax relief. Jaitley's first budget led to tax savings of about 40,000 rupees for those in the highest tax bracket last year. On the inflation front, the common man hopes there will be some measures to counter it. Plunging oil prices recently have only fueled this hope.
एज ए टैक्स प्रैक्टिशनर होने के नाते मेरी उम्मीद ये है कि पहले तो सबसे पहले जीएसटी एप्लीकेबल हो जाना चाहिए, जिससे हमारा टैक्स रेवेन्यू कलेक्शन जो बढ़ेगा. नंबर 2, हमारा मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर, सर्विस सेक्टर और ट्रेडिंग सेक्टर, ये जितने भी लोग सारे लोग काम कर रहे हैं, इनकी जितनी भी बिलिंग है सारी बिलिंग ऑनलाइन होनी चाहिए. जब बिलिंग ऑनलाइन हो जाएगी हमारी, तो टैक्स रेवेन्यू कलेक्शन इतना बढ़ जाएगा कि गवर्नमेंट ने आज तक इतना सोचा ही नहीं होगा.
तो उम्मीद ये थी कि गरीब आदमी के लिए जैसे एजुकेशन, हेल्थ, ठीक है जी, डेली नीड चीजें ये सस्ती होनी चाहिए. गरीब आदमी खुश होता है इन चीजों में.
The budget is also expected to give a big push to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Make in India campaign with incentives for several sectors. A push to indigenous manufacturing will boost jobs and help rejuvenate an underperforming economy.
It will be a very important budget for India, and effectively last 5-6 years we didn't have the kind of growth that is required by India. We need to create huge number of jobs every year, and that means that we need to have a budget which is basically pro industry, pro job creation. What is good for India is good for BSE.
Jaitley has promised to implement the nationwide goods and services tax from the 1st of April 2016. A bill was introduced in Parliament in December to rationalize state and central indirect taxes into a harmonized sales tax. However, its passage will depend on whether the Finance Minister keeps his promise to compensate states adequately. Investors will also keenly watch the budget speech to see if it finds a way to boost capital spending while exercising fiscal restraint. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, joining me for a chat this morning to talk about what to expect from the budget and also several other aspects of the budget itself is Himanshu Vatt, Senior Editor of the Economic Times. Himanshu, thank you. Good morning. Big day today. All eyes on the Finance Minister. What are the key expectations, do you think, as far as this budget is concerned?
First thing, everybody heard about Achhe Din coming, and here is a moment where the world will know what exactly is on offer to improve a lot of the people. Getting a bit more into specifics, I think growth and fiscal consolidation, as your own report said, and I'll be very keenly looking out for what he has in offer for infrastructure, because that's one key area. That's an area, if it is given the boost, can kickstart the investment cycle. There is something which the common man will be waiting for, the salaried class, whether there's a better tax regime for them, a little more concessions in terms of how much one is taxed, what are the kick-off limits and the rates for direct taxation. And of course, GST is the important thing, what roadmap one gets. One has been hearing of GST for a few years now and it keeps getting deferred. So there is expectation that there will be a firm roadmap for that. And that is another game changer for the economy, for the state finances. So on the whole, a whole lot of expectations. This budget has to deliver a promise of growth and better finances, the fiscal arithmetic.
The government is not new anymore. Of course, we can put the word new out of the way, and the expectations really are high. But as far as the budget last year was concerned and the kind of promises that were made, do you think that the government has been able to deliver on it, or is it still lagging behind somewhere?
You're talking of the first budget?
Yes, the first budget.
See, for me, the most important thing in that budget was his statement that the fiscal targets are difficult, but he said, I'm going to take this up as a challenge. And that is looking likely because there's been some disinvestment, there's been this stroke of good luck as far as oil prices are concerned. Yes. So if the fiscal targets are met, that will be a very big plus. And only last week we had the Finance Commission report which talked about adhering to the other targets of, after 4.1 you come to 3.8 and you come to 3. So fiscal discipline is very much on the cards. And if that is achieved, if you recall the previous statement of the RBI governor, Raghuram Rajan, he cut interest rates a bit and said the next dose would depend on, your fiscal arithmetic. So if that is proved and the budget, has expenditure and incentives for growth, on top of that, if an interest rate comes, that's when you're going to see real action.
Indeed. Going by the rail budget and what we've seen in the rail budget, of course, in the government's words, it wasn't a populist budget, but it was a realist budget. So is that going to carry forward for the budget as well, for the full budget?
I would expect so, because the railway budget obviously reflects the overall political economic thinking of the government. And to have a rail budget which does not introduce so many new trains, every rail budget does that, and many of the trains are not introduced, some are delayed.
But at least announcements are made.
Announcements are made. So this budget was very realistic. It did not want to announce, needlessly, pointlessly, and the focus of getting the house in order. Key financial issues like the operating ratio is perhaps the best in a decade or so. I would expect a similar philosophy in the general budget also, that they're not going to make unreasonable promises, but they will certainly do things to kickstart growth, or rather accelerate growth. Growth is pretty much there already. And the economic survey has already given a picture that we are in a kind of a sweet spot where inflation is down, growth expectations are there, and here is a time you can undertake some good reforms. If you look at the political climate also, you don't have an assembly election till the end of the year. And after this year, there are going to be some major states going to the polls. So overall, everything seems right for a good budget from a government that is determined by its statements for growth.
All right. Do stay with us, Himanshu. We'll continue talking to you, of course, but in the meantime, let's take a look at another report, generally known as the Statement of the Government's Intent for the Economy. The NDA government's economic survey, of course, for 2014-15 predicts that India will soon become the world's fastest growing economy with a growth rate of more than 8%. It also noted that India had hit an economic sweet spot and had room for big ticket reforms. Here's more.
Taking the current government's massive political mandate as an endorsement for the reform path, the economic survey says India has a historic opportunity to aim for a double-digit growth rate, while assuming that private investment will be the primary driver of growth in the long run. It says the government needs public investment in the short run. According to the survey, the government will adhere to a fiscal deficit target of 4.1% of the GDP in 2014-2015. It says retail inflation for 2015 could be between 5 and 5.5%. Farm output, however, is likely to lag behind at 4%. while estimating the current account deficit to fall to 1% of the GDP in the next fiscal.
Government has clearly indicated that the government is on the course to the economic reforms despite political roadblocks in parliament.
The survey highlights that tax estimates of the government are overestimated and there's need to increase revenue generation. This may dampen the expectations of corporate India that Arun Jaitley will announce a number of tax SOPs in his budget on Saturday.
They will have to be correcting the tax structure that is in place. They will have to be creating a level playing field. Many of the inverted duty structure promotes more imported goods rather than the domestic goods. It will be a great signal not only to the Indian investor but to the global investor that India or the new government means business.
The opposition parties slammed the government for over-enthusiasm.
अब आपके एक्सपोर्ट्स जो है घटे हुए हैं 11% से ज्यादा. आपका इंडस्ट्रियल ग्रोथ और आपका मैन्युफैक्चरिंग ग्रोथ नेगेटिव में है. आपका एग्रीकल्चरल ग्रोथ घटा है. पहली बार आजादी के बाद जितना जमीन आपके अंदर खेती होती थी वो खेती का जमीन घटा है. अब ग्रोथ कहां से हो रही है भाई? ये आंकड़ों की मतलब मैनिपुलेशन के अलावा और कोई मतलब इसके लिए एक्सप्लेनेशन नहीं है. प्रेडिक्टेड द ग्रोथ ऑफ 8.1%, but this is according to new criteria, which is not acceptable worldwide. If you go by the old criteria, then the growth will be around 6. So I think the actual figure of the growth is 6%. And with new criteria which the government has adopted, they can claim it to be 8%.
The survey says the current macroeconomic scenario in India is more favorable than other countries. Much of the improvement is a consequence of the sharp decline in global crude oil prices. The fall in oil prices, a normal monsoon and reduction of inflationary expectations are likely to create space for RBI to ease its monetary policy. Kriti Mishra's report for Rajya Sabha TV.
Meanwhile, one of the most important policy direction or guidance that people will be looking for in this year's budget is the government's roadmap on a proposed goods and services tax. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley has already tabled a modified bill in the Lok Sabha last December following an agreement with the states. He is expected to tweak some tax rates in preparation to implement the GST from 2016 in his first full budget that will be presented during the course of the day.
A reform that's been in the works for over 10 years. The Finance Minister wants to implement the goods and service tax regime from April 2016. Industry bodies and tax experts are waiting to see if the union budget will finally present a roadmap.
What would be most important in the budget according to me? The most important thing is he should announce a roadmap, which he has been over a period of time saying we'll probably do it in this much time frame and this much time frame. I think he needs to put a seal on it.
When it comes to taxes on sales and goods, India has a complex duty structure, both at the center and state levels. It starts with a basic excise duty of 12% on production, a service tax at a similar rate. Add to it value-added tax that state governments charge on sales at varying rates of 4 to 20%. In addition, the centre also levies a 1% sales tax on interstate sales of goods.
The rates of excise duty and service tax can be tweaked in a manner, and ultimately when the common rate is fixed by the GST, this is in line with that particular thing.
Despite the setback in the Delhi Assembly elections, Finance Minister Jaitley is determined to push through economic reforms like the GST. Any announcement in his budget speech could clear the government's stand on the issue. Once implemented, the GST will subsume most of the indirect taxes on domestic production, sale of goods, and also providing services in India. Implementation of GST alone could boost GDP growth by 1% and provide revenues to both the centre and states. Krishnanand Tripathi, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, it's time for a short break now, but much more lined up on the other side. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
आम बजट 2015। राज्यसभा टीवी पर खास प्रसारण। वित्त मंत्री का भाषण, जानकारों का विश्लेषण। मुंबई, दिल्ली और बेंगलुरु से देखिए आज दिन भर लगातार लाइव, सिर्फ राज्यसभा टीवी पर।
Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. Well, with the union budget around the corner, experts in the health feels that the government will not pay mere lip service to the goal of health for all. They want the upcoming budget to focus on bringing in tax reduction on health insurance and free services to the poor.
To move towards health for all, two key initiatives, that is the free drug service and free diagnostic service, would be taken up on a priority.
With an annual spending of just 1.4% of GDP on healthcare, the World Health Organization ranks India's healthcare system at a lowly 112 among 190 countries. Nowhere near the lofty goal of health for all that the Finance Minister announced in Union Budget 2014-15.
When we say health for all, it would also emphasize on reliable delivery mechanisms of healthcare services, the infrastructure behind it, the resources, the manpower beneath all this. So it's a huge complex program then. It's very, in one single line we would conclude that health for all, but how do we achieve it? Where are the pharmacists? Where are the lab technicians? Where are the X-ray technicians? Where are the nurses? Where are the doctors?
At 35,163 crore rupees, allocation for the health and family welfare sector in the 2014-15 budget marked a hike of 27%, but towards late December, media reports said fiscal strains were forcing the government to cut nearly 20% in its 2014-15 healthcare budget.
All the different insurance schemes like the CGHS, the Employed State Insurance Scheme, the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, all of them should be integrated into one scheme so that every citizen gets the same kind of service.
Health professionals feel the government can't afford a shrinking health budget, not only when it puts at risk key disease control initiatives, but also when the country needs a good insurance scheme to make services affordable and accessible.
Government is planning to transfer more money to these states. That is, Finance Commission's share of taxes will increase from 32% to 42%. It will mean that the centrally sponsored programs that are being run, they would be short by 1 lakh crores. At the same time, states will get untied grant of additional 1 lakh crores.
In order to be in line with other developing economies, experts feel healthcare allocation should go up to at least 5% of the GDP. The government wants to launch an ambitious universal healthcare program this year.
Given that China spends 3% GDP and the United States 8.3% on health, experts hope that the government will do better than previous years in setting aside higher allocation for the sector. With camera person Sudipta Das, this is Anshu Jay Singh for Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, let's take a look at another special report now as far as the budget is concerned. Let's discuss the expectations of millions of homemakers who manage kitchens and some even their careers. Let's take a look at what several households expect from this budget. Shalini Mittal and her husband Aditya recently bought a house in Faridabad, 30 kilometers from Delhi. Shalini works as a manager with a public sector company, while Aditya is a private sector employee. But despite earning two incomes, the couple wage a continuous struggle with their budget, trying to balance EMI payments, a high cost of living and education expenses.
Education nowadays is very costly. तो उसमें expectation ये है कि भाई अच्छा अगर हमें government structure मिल जाए तो private की तरफ हम लोग नहीं जाएं. तो एक वो भी है कि वो cut down करेगा बहुत हमारे expenses.
Shalini's experience resonates with almost every household in the locality, where the only hope is that the finance minister will announce some relief. Shalini's 11-year-old son, Rinak, studies in a public school. She feels private schools, even at the primary level, charge too much. It's the same complaint at the Tiwari household as well, where her 2 daughters and a son are completing their higher education.
तनख्वाह का ज्यादातर हिस्सा पढ़ाई में ही चली जाती है। एक एक कोचिंग का 1-1 लाख रुपया साल कर लेता है, तो महंगी तो है। जिसके 3 बच्चे हैं उसके तो ज्यादा खर्चे उसी में जाएंगे, फिर घर का बजट तो गड़बड़ आता ही है।
Both want the finance minister to pass the benefit of reduction in petroleum products to consumers. They also want quality education at a reasonable fee, all of which means more investment in the public education system, both at primary level and in higher education.
The cost of education for schooling is very high, and it's been going up fast. Now, that being the case, clearly taxpayers would like relief on that.
Both retail and wholesale inflation rates have come down in recent times, but cost of living is still very high in modern cities. Both housewives and working women are facing pressure managing household budgets. They are hoping that Arun Jaitley's first full-fledged budget will change that. Krishnanand Tripathi, Rajya Sabha Television. Well, Himanshu, coming back to you now, of course, we were speaking about it earlier. We were speaking about how the expectations really are high of the finance minister this time around. You know, are we going to see some kind of tax ops maybe this time to try and ease the pressure on several households and on the common man? What's the government really going to announce to try and take away that burden?
Well, there's a good chance there could be some change in direct taxes which people pay. And more likely perhaps is maybe an increase in investment allowances, the limits at which deductions are made, whether it is something like a provident fund or something. There could be more incentives to invest in infrastructure, financial instruments, because infrastructure is a key requirement and funding infrastructure is a very important aspect. And again, direct tax, you know, there have been huge expectations and a growing sense of impatience among the middle class, because economy was down in the dumps for 2 or 3 years and people had very high expectation that this man will come and, you know, do something good for them. The other aspect of a tax concession is that, you know, if it gives a little more money in people's pocket, it should to a large extent increase consumer demand, and that could be another engine for investment and economic growth. So there's a lot of hope, but one also has to remember that this government has 4 more years, so maybe the first year is not the one in which it will give out the most. So,
indeed, it does seem so as well, isn't it? Because the government seems to be sending out signals to reiterate the point that you're making. Of course, is the fact that the government has been saying that it's looking at a long-term plan. It's looking at, you know, reforms from a long-term perspective, and that's the message right from the beginning.
Yeah, you know, and the country badly needs some good long-term strategies. Even if you look at it politically, what it really wants is that people should be very happy in 2019 when it goes back to them for votes. But at the same time, you know, it would not like to have people disappointed. And even if not much is given in terms of concessions, surely there will be an indication that, you know, this is the roadmap and this is the level of taxation we want to achieve. So one would expect something, but not a goodie, freebie, good away. Not that kind of concession.
You know, we've spoken about households and, you know, what's in it for the common man, but let's talk about the industry and corporates now. Do you expect something for in it for them as well? Because the corporates thus far seem to be disappointed with this government because they thought that they're going to get a lot from this government, and they've been complaining of late that, you know, not much is being done for the corporate sector.
See, if you want economic growth, you certainly have to create conditions for these corporates to be able to borrow money from the banks and invest in projects. As of now, if you look at the previous quarter's earnings, they're pretty disappointing. You know, many companies' profits have come down. There's been a kind of a shrinkage. Many of them are under huge pressure from banks. You know, even some of the M&A deals you have seen, that is under pressure from the banks that, okay, you got to pay us back our money. We don't care, you sell your stake or do something. So there's been a general stress, and this is not the ideal condition for rapid economic growth. So there has to be something for them, because you cannot have a bunch of sick people preparing for a race. So I would expect something for it. But that has to be fine-tuned and calibrated and balanced with, in a political sense. This government any government would not want to be seen as a government in the hands of the captains of industry. So there would be, it will have to be marketed pretty well, articulated well. There would also be, a few things on discipline. One of the things yesterday's economic survey said that, there are certain projects in which companies bid recklessly.
Yes.
And there were attempts to revive them or negotiate things. And the economic survey in one page said that these projects should have been allowed to die to give a stern message against reckless bidding and to encourage fiscal discipline, financial discipline.
Yes.
So there will be a package of, I would expect the government would want industry to do well, but at the same time there would be caveats that, if you cross this line, then sorry.
All right. We'll have to leave it at that, Himanshu. Thank you so much for joining us on the program, but do stay with us. We'll be back in just a bit, of course, to talk about much more as far as the budget is concerned. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this short break.